Alright, fuckers and fuckettes. Now, I found a couple of bombshells in Obama's supposed jobs bill. Number one, he ain't talking about just tax to rich. I mean, if you count all the other little taxes that he threw in there, he's going to tax the fuck out of everybody, and anybody that gets on a plane is going to pay an extra $25 just to get harassed by TSA. Which is something that nobody likes. I mean, hell, TSA's been around for 10 goddamn years, and they ain't done a fucking thing. They've not busted one terrorist. All they've done is harass American civilians, period. I mean, and American military personnel, they've harassed the shit out of them. You can go on YouTube, hell, they're fucking doing cavity searches on 6-year-old girls and shit. But, anyway, the part that bothers me the most, if you look at Obama's jobs plan, now, he has written it in there to where any state that accepts this federal money is going to end up forfeiting their 11th Amendment rights. And if you don't know what the 11th Amendment is, if you look in the 11th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, judicial power of the United States shall not be construed to extend any suit in law or equity commenced or prosecuted against one of the United States by citizens of another state or by citizens or subjects of any foreign state. Now, if you look down into Section 376 of Obama's jobs bill, Section A, abrogation of state immunity. A state shall not be immune under the 11th Amendment to the Constitution from a suit brought in federal court of a competent jurisdiction for a violation of this act. Now, Section B, 1A, waiver. A state's receipt or use of federal financial assistance for any, you got that keyword in there, any program or activity of a state shall constitute a waiver of sovereign immunity under the 11th Amendment of the Constitution or otherwise to a suit brought by an employee or applicant for employment of that program or activity under this act. And then down in Section D, notwithstanding any other provision of this act, remedies, including remedies at law and in equity, are available for the violation to the same extent as such remedies would be available against a non-government entity. Now, what this means is either Obama is trying to take away the state's sovereignty and turn the whole country into federal law, or somebody on his staff is really shitty at writing legislation. And I don't think it's the latter. I would love to, but based on Obama's previous, I mean, basically, come on, the man's wiped his ass with the Constitution more times than I've lit joints with $100 bills. And that's just, plain and simple fact. But I mean, that would open up the states wide open. You'd have people from New Jersey filing suit against Minnesota for they didn't get hired. Maybe they sent in a fucking job application by email or something. But it's loosely worded enough to where it's not specific to the jobs bill. So if this was to go through and a state was to take any federal funds, whether it be for school, roads, whatever, this is loosely worded enough to where anybody from any state could sue that state over literally anything. They've given up their sovereign rights and they've surrendered themselves to federal court's jurisdiction instead of their own state's court's jurisdiction just by accepting those federal funds. Now, Obama's kind of tricky on that. And Pelosi and Reid, yeah, they're about the same. Then you got this, oh fuck, we ain't even gonna get into that Debbie chick, she's in that case, but anyway, back in 1890, you had Hands versus Louisiana, 134 U.S. 1, 1890. In the ruling of the court then, the Supreme Court had held that the 11th Amendment prohibits suits brought against a state by its own citizens as well as from citizens of other states. Without this doctrine of sovereign immunity, lawsuits brought by private individuals could result in states being forced to pay monetary damages for alleged violations. People with valid claims against the state would not be the only ones collecting monetary damages, blah, blah, blah. Now, a first-year paralegal student can tell you that most states, counties, cities, they'll settle out of court with you, usually at more than what the lawyers would cost you, because it's cheaper for them to settle than it is to actually take it to trial, you know, because where you and me pay $3,000 and $4,000 for a lawyer, they're paying these goddamn government wages, and that shit goes, you know, it goes into the ridiculous. I can't say because I happen to have family that are really high up in the state patrol, and got several family members and several friends that happen to be lawyers working for the state. But it's some big money. And, you know, you got Obama sitting there wiping his ass with the Constitution on this one. You know, he's up there chanting, "Oh, pass this bill. You got to pass this bill now." Well, look, people are just now starting to read that bill, and this is just one of 4 incidents. And like I say, it's Section 376. And I didn't read you the whole thing because it's pretty long. He wants the states to give up their sovereign rights. Now, okay, first, I mean, this is going to be a special interest group bonanza, you know. I mean, you got some nutcase out in California that wants to sue Iowa because they let, you know, they could sue the state of Iowa under, if this went through, they would be able to sue the state of Iowa for some guy working on trucks in his fucking barn without a EPA certified oil recycling thing, something that we have not had for a couple of 100 years. But literally, that kind of a case could go through. Millions of those new, it'd be like opening up a fucking dam and just saying, hey, let the flood happen. You know, and that's just one example. I mean, the state of Florida could get sued for allowing a redneck like me to work on 1964 vintage Jap bikes instead of American ones. Literally, they could file suits that ridiculous. And not even be from the state in question. And it's loosely worded enough that it does not just apply to the Jobs Act. In fact, it applies across the board, and and there's other little things in there, you know, like he said he was going to tax the rich. Okay, first off, the rich guys are paying 10 times in taxes what the average American pays. Hell, they're paying 10 times in taxes in 1 year than the average American makes in 4 or 5. So they're paying their fair share already. In fact, they're the ones that pay most of the fucking taxes already. Because it's like 40-something% of us don't pay taxes at all. Me, I pay taxes out the ass. I got $42,000 a year income, and state, federal, and property taxes, there's 42 68.4% of my income is gone at that point, state, federal, and property. Those taxes eat my fucking $42,000 up. I get to live on less than $15,000 a year. But he's gonna impose fees at airports, even if it's just $10 or $25, it's still a tax, and it's for something that nobody likes. I mean, the only ones that seem to be liking TSA anymore are TSA themselves. I mean, it was a well-intentioned group at the beginning, but they've gotten so huge it's pathetic, and I mean, they have almost they don't have anybody to answer to other than themselves, and they're not doing a very good job of convicting the TSA agents who, I mean, granted, they convicted the ones that were doing the drug deals, and that's probably because they forgot to give a kickback to somebody higher up. Oh, man, shit. Go make more coffee. And now, just to end this on a note, I've been called racist recently on Twitter and this my yearbook site that I'm on, and even on one of my blogs because I'm so down on Obama. Well, I'm not down on Obama. This Confederate flag on my head has to do with get her done. That's what that's about. You remember Larry the Cable Guy that's saying get her done? Well, that's how you get these hats, is with a Confederate flag on it. And I can go right over here. I brought one out, because I do occasionally fly both. Hell, I can do like this right here. And that still ain't going to make me a racist. It ain't going to change the fact that my daughter's half Brazilian. It ain't going to change the fact that one of my best racing partners is black. It ain't going to change the fact that, several of my friends happen to be black. Now, if I call them friend, they're working class. I don't care if they're black or not. They're still white trash to me. Because they work for a living. That's what they do. And anybody that knows me will tell you, hey, I don't give a fuck what color somebody's skin is. I'll associate with the working class folks and them non-working scum that are sucking up the welfare dollars and the Social Security disability dollars and scared to get a job because it'll fuck up their Social Security, their SSI bullshit. I don't like them kind of people, plain and simple. I might fuck some of the hotter chicks that, but that don't mean I'm going to date the bitch, because if she's on that SSI and scared to get a job, that means, hey, it's a one-night thing and call it good, because homie don't like no non-working scum. I've worked for everything that I've got. Everything that I've ever bought has been paid for in cash. And I understand people financing shit. I think they're kind of stupid. But as long as they're working and they're not overextending themselves, I ain't got nothing against them. And me picking on Obama has nothing to do with the color of that man's skin. What it does have to do with is poorly written stuff like this. Now, I actually, based on some of what else he's tried to get through, I actually believe he did this shit on purpose. He's trying to get the states to give up their sovereign rights. I mean, the 10th Amendment and the 11th Amendment, to me, are part of the Constitution and important. So basically what he's done here is wiped his ass with the Constitution, which I don't believe in. There's no way you're going to get me to believe in it. That has nothing to do with the color of his skin. That has everything to do with, I sincerely and truly believe that this is, I sincerely and truly believe that Mr. Obama is some kind of a communist. You can call it socialist all you want, but, I mean, then you got Solyndra and Light Squared and 4 or 5 other companies held the trail on Solyndra. If you look at Michelle Obama's shelter companies, now what I mean by shelter companies is she has a few holdings in some companies at this level. Well, those companies have massive holdings down here at this level. And in a couple of cases, it's 3 levels deep, but it's always there. It's not hard to run the money trail right straight back to Obama. And he himself has several shelter companies that have questionable amounts of money in them. And that's just what you can find looking around without having to, pay for shit under the Freedom of Information Act or anything like that. And you've got things like E-Verify. Now, the reason Obama is against E-Verify is because his own Social Security number doesn't pass. That's another one of the reasons why I'm against Obama. There's too many questions about who this fucker is. If it was cut and dried, I wouldn't care. But it's not cut and dried. And I have seen nothing that he's put his name to. I'm not going to say he writes all this shit. I mean, he is an intelligent person, but he might actually be writing all this shit. If he is, well, he's either intentionally trying to circumvent the Constitution and wipe his ass with it, or he's just one hell of a sloppy goddamn legislator. Either way, he has no business being in the Oval Office. And I mean, we're finding out things like we've got our money, our tax dollars going to his political campaign for 2012 already. In this jobs bill, one of the groups that would qualify for federal funding happens to be Acorn. They would qualify for federal funding. Now, Acorn's one of the most corrupt fucking voter things in the world. This has nothing to do with racism. I'm not a racist. I've experienced reverse racism all my life. I've experienced outright racism from the whites all my life, because you see, my Jewish ass happens to live in the South. And I don't fit on the white side of the coin. I get along with most white boys. I get along with most blacks. But there's a lot of blacks that don't know me, don't know anything about me. You go into, so you stop in where that King Frog Motel is. What is that? That's Adel or Moultrie, Georgia. I'm not sure which. The sign says both right there. But them black folks, they start calling you shit. And I mean, I ain't never done nothing to them people. To me, that's reverse racism. Because, they're calling me whitey and they're calling me cracker, cracker based on the Florida plate alone. And that's been a couple of years ago, and I've had just as many good experiences going through that same gas station. When I stop to help somebody on the side of the road, which I do often, I'm one of the few that is still, hey, if I got tools with me, I'm stopping to help you ass and hoping like hell you don't call 911 when you see my hairy ass pulling up to a stop behind you. That's just me, plain and simple. I mean, I'll help anybody, and that don't matter the color of their skin. But you got people like Obama up there. Obama has nothing to do with America. I mean, he is, in my opinion, anti-American, and that's what makes me anti-Obama. I don't give a fuck what color he is. But, the Democrats, when you hit them with facts, they get pissed, and the only thing that they've got to fall back on is racism. The other day, on my yearbook site, and on, I won't say which exact blog, but it was either MSDN or TechNet. And I get both of those at the same time. That's why I don't want to say which one of those it was, because I'll say the wrong one and it'll be the other. But, somebody said there right there, meant that I'm a racist. Well, anybody who's actually read real history, there was this wonderful thing called the Moral Bill. And that's what the Civil War was all about. It was about unfair taxation, because when that shit kicked off in 1860, you had several goods coming in from foreign countries. And we're not talking about slaves. We're talking about actual shit that you use every day that the South needed. And they weren't buying it from the North. The North had them. They were importing them. So they passed the North passed this Moral Bill and said, hey, we're going to tax you. Well, at the point that they did that, 84% of those unfair taxes, 84% of all the taxes in the U.S. were paid at that time as a result of those unfair taxes being imposed on the southern states. Now that's what caused the original 6 southern states to secede. Total of 11 states finally did secede. It didn't have to do with slavery. In fact, if you look, there was a Yankee general that didn't sell his slaves until after they were outlawed, and yet there's more than one Southern general that didn't even have slaves to begin with, and one that sold them right before the war. If you want to look at Jefferson Davis, that child of his wasn't no slave. That child of his was his child, black child. And the Yankees tore that child away screaming. Tore the mother away screaming at the end of the war. That's really how that shit went down. The winners of the wars get to write the histories of the wars, and Lincoln decided to make it an issue about slaves, and that's what it ended up getting written down in the kiddie history books as. But anyone who has actually read history and understands the real history behind the Civil War knows that it has nothing to do with the slaves. It has everything to do with unfair taxation, much like we're going through right now. And we've got to take the states that are redeclaring their sovereignty, which that brings me to the point of this is why I think Obama wrote that into this jobs bill. You've got too many states, 37 of them have stepped up and redeclared their sovereignty. That's why Obama put that in, that if these states are taking federal funds, he worded it loosely enough to where it doesn't matter what kind of federal funds. But if these states are taking federal funds, then they can be sued by anyone, blah, blah, blah. They give up their rights under the 11th Amendment, as they give up their sovereign rights. That's why Obama wrote that in there. You got states like Montana and Tennessee, hell, they've passed laws now that say, hey, as long as that gun was made in, we use Montana. As long as that gun was made in Montana and does not leave Montana, the federal government has no jurisdiction over it. Now, I agree with that. I agree with that 100%. Guns are a good thing. They keep you protected. Start getting old like me, you can't just fucking stab nobody no more, or punch them in the Adam's apple, which, by the way, that usually works. And you go into some of these towns, like you go into downtown Tampa, fuck, I ain't going down there without a gun on me. I ain't going into Bradenton, just north of Sarasota, without a gun on me, because hell, all them people jacking them cars and shit, they got guns on them. And they're counting on the fact that most people don't. But, anyway, I think it's a good thing that these states are redeclaring their sovereignty, but at the same time, I think that is the reason why Obama tried to bury this in that jobs bill. And that's not the only thing he's got buried in there, where he preaches on tax the rich. The middle class and the poor people are going to get hit the worst on all these extra taxes, because they all seem to be on shit that's not going to bother the average person making over $100,000 a year. They're going to bother the shit out of those of us broke motherfuckers making the real national average income, which is less than $50,000 a year, way less. I mean, most of the people I know, they're lucky if they make 27 or 30,000. But you got all these Democrats that are pushing this and saying, oh, yeah, you guys should push your congressman to pass this bill. No, I'm not a Republican. I'm more towards the Constitutional Party, if anything. But unfortunately, the Constitutional Party does not stand a snowball's chance in hell of winning shit. So I've got to back the Republicans on this upcoming election. Because the Democrats seem to be a bunch of socialists, and I'm already seeing too much in America of what I grew up believing to be the bad things about communism are happening right here, right now. So my suggestion is, hey, read that bill real carefully and let it sink in what Obama has done with this bill. Don't bother with, one or two points that I've brought up. Bother with the whole thing as a whole. I mean, if that jobs bill goes through, the average person making $27,000 a year, who right now wouldn't be paying any taxes, literally at all, would be paying about $7,000 a year in indirect taxes, meaning they're not really taxes, but you're going to get taxed and you're going to pay this shit. Shit ain't right. But, alright. Holler at y'all fuckers and fuckettes later.